The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural domes of Colony Station 7, a human settlement on the outer rim of explored space. 8-year-old Sarah Chun pressed her small hands against the transparent aluminum viewport, watching the cargo shuttles drift between the station's spinning rings like lazy metal whales. Her breath fogged the surface as she counted them silently, a daily ritual that brought her comfort in the vastness of space. Sarah lived with her parents, Dr. Marcus Chun and engineer Lisa Chun, in the residential sector of the station. The colony had been humanity's pride for 3 years now, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. 2,000 souls called this place home, growing food, mining asteroids, and pushing the boundaries of human expansion into the galaxy. The Galactic Empire had noticed humanity's rapid expansion with growing concern. For millennia, the Empire had maintained order across 7,000 star systems, keeping younger species in check through a combination of superior technology and calculated displays of force. Humans were relative newcomers to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years prior. Their aggressive expansion and stubborn independence violated every protocol the Empire had established for managing primitive species. Ambassador Korthak of the Hegemon Fleet studied the intelligence reports from his flagship, the Dominion's Edge. The massive dreadnought hung in the darkness beyond the solar system's edge, its sensors locked onto the human colony. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated skull, processed the data with cold efficiency. The humans had established 17 colonies in just 5 years, each one a potential threat to Imperial order. Admiral, his aide, Subcommander Veltar, approached with characteristic hegemony precision. The Council demands a demonstration, something to remind these humans of their place in the galactic hierarchy. Korthak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The hegemony had perfected the art of controlled aggression over 3,000 years. A surgical strike, carefully calculated to send a message without triggering full-scale war. One settlement, eliminated completely, would serve as an object lesson to the other human colonies. Begin the approach, he commanded. Charge the planet killers. Back on Colony Station 7, Sarah was helping her mother tend to the hydroponic gardens in Dome C. The child's laughter echoed through the artificial atmosphere as she chased a escaped butterfly, one of the Earth species they'd brought to maintain the ecosystem balance. Her parents watched with the kind of peaceful contentment that only came from building something meaningful together. Dr. Chun was a xenobiologist, studying the unique microorganisms they discovered in the local asteroid belt. His research suggested that life might be far more common in the universe than previously thought. Engineer Chun maintained the station's life support systems, her expertise keeping 2,000 people alive in the hostile environment of space. Neither of them knew that their world was about to end. The first sign of trouble came from the automated sensor array. Traffic Control Officer Jamie Rodriguez was monitoring the routine scanner sweeps when her instruments detected massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the system's edge. The readings were unlike anything in human databases, energy outputs that dwarfed their largest warships by orders of magnitude. Captain Morrison to the command center, she announced over the comm system, her voice tight with concern. Captain Elena Morrison had commanded Colony Station 7 since its inception. A veteran of the asteroid wars and the Terra Mars conflicts, she'd seen her share of combat. But as she studied the sensor data, her blood ran cold. 3 massive contacts, each one easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest battlecruiser, were moving toward their position with unmistakable hostile intent. How long until they reach us? Morrison asked. 18 hours at current velocity, Rodriguez replied. Captain, I've never seen ships that large. Our weapons wouldn't even scratch their hull plating. Morrison activated the emergency communication array, sending a priority message toward Earth. The quantum entanglement communicator would ensure the message arrived instantaneously, but help was 4 weeks away at best. She then triggered the colony's emergency protocols, sealing the atmospheric domes and powering up the defensive grid. The defensive grid was more symbolic than functional. A collection of point defense lasers and missile batteries designed to handle asteroids and pirates, not capital ships. Morrison knew they were essentially defenseless, but she'd be damned if she didn't try to protect her people. In the residential sector, the Chun family gathered around their small dining table for what would be their last meal together. Sarah was excited about her upcoming birthday party, chattering about the cake her father had promised to bake and the zero-gravity games they'd play in the recreation center. "Daddy, will you teach me to pilot a shuttle when I'm older?" Sarah asked, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. Dr. Chin smiled, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Of course, sweetheart. By the time you're old enough, we might even have exploratory ships that can reach other galaxies." The family's domestic tranquility was interrupted by the soft chime of the emergency communication system. Captain Morrison's voice filled their quarters with grim authority. "Attention all colonists. We have detected 3 unidentified vessels approaching our position. As a precautionary measure, all civilians should remain in their quarters until further notice. Emergency teams, report to your stations immediately." The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like predators materializing from a nightmare. Each ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls black as the void between stars. The lead vessel, Dominion's Edge, bristled with weapon emplacements that could reduce planets to cosmic dust. Ambassador Korthak stood on his command bridge, surveying the human colony through the main view screen. The station was pathetically small, a collection of spinning rings and agricultural domes that represented humanity's desperate attempt to establish a foothold among the stars. It would serve as an adequate example. "Open a channel to the human settlement," he commanded. Captain Morrison's communication officer looked up with confusion. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's not using any human protocols." "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The main screen flickered, revealing the alien visage of Ambassador Korthak. His elongated skull and 4-eyed arrangement marked him as a hegemony official, though Morrison had never seen one in person. When he spoke, the universal translator rendered his words in crisp, emotionless English. "Human colony designated 7. I am Ambassador Korthak of the Galactic Empire. You have violated Imperial space by establishing this settlement without proper authorization. Your species has demonstrated a disturbing tendency toward aggressive expansion that threatens galactic stability." Morrison stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "Ambassador, we established this colony in unclaimed space. We violated no treaties or agreements. Our presence here is entirely peaceful." Korthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your species' definition of unclaimed space is irrelevant. The Empire has maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. Your rapid expansion represents a potential threat to that order." "What do you want?" Morrison asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "This colony will be destroyed as an example to other human settlements. You have 1 hour to transmit any final messages to your homeworld. Consider this a mercy." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Morrison immediately activated the general alarm. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under imminent threat from hostile alien forces. Begin immediate evacuation procedures. Repeat, begin evacuation procedures immediately." Throughout the station, families grabbed emergency supplies and rushed toward the escape pods. The evacuation plan had been drilled countless times, but no one had expected to use it under these circumstances. There were enough pods for everyone, but the nearest human outpost was weeks away. In their quarters, the Chun family moved with practiced efficiency. Dr. Chun grabbed his research data, while Engineer Chun collected their emergency supplies. Sarah clutched her favorite stuffed animal, a small bear her grandmother had given her before they left Earth. "Are we going on a trip?" Sarah asked as they rushed through the corridors toward their assigned escape pod. "Yes, sweetheart," her mother replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We're going to visit another station." The escape pods were small, cramped vessels designed for short-term survival. Each one could support a family of 4 for approximately 2 weeks, long enough to reach the nearest human outpost, if they were lucky. The pods launched in waves, their tiny engines pushing them away from the station as fast as possible. Sarah pressed her face to the small porthole in their pod, watching Colony Station 7 shrink behind them. The 3 alien ships hung in space like dark monuments to humanity's insignificance, their weapon arrays beginning to glow with ominous energy. "Why are they doing this?" she asked her father. Dr. Chun pulled his daughter close, his throat tight with emotion. "Sometimes, sweetheart, there are people in the universe who are afraid of others who are different. They think the only way to be safe is to hurt others first." Ambassador Korthak watched the fleeing escape pods with detached interest. The humans were showing admirable efficiency in their evacuation, though it would ultimately prove meaningless. The nearest human outpost was beyond the range of their primitive escape systems. The survivors would drift in space until their life support failed, providing an additional lesson about the futility of defying the Empire. "All pods have cleared the station," reported Subcommander Veltar. "Excellent. Kortok reployed. Begin the bombardment." The first salvo from Dominion's edge lit up the darkness like a miniature star being born. Particle beams and plasma torpedoes struck the station's hull with devastating precision, tearing through the industrial sections like tissue paper. The agricultural domes collapsed in brilliant flashes of escaping atmosphere and burning vegetation. In their escape pod, the Chun family watched their home die. The station that had housed 2,000 people, the result of years of human effort and dreams, was reduced to expanding clouds of debris in mere minutes. Sarah began to cry, not understanding what she was witnessing, but sensing the profound loss that surrounded her. "It's gone," Engineer Chen whispered, her hands shaking as she monitored their life support systems. "Everything we built is gone." The second wave of attacks targeted the industrial platforms and mining facilities. The Empire wanted to ensure that nothing remained that could serve as a foundation for future human expansion. Automated refineries and manufacturing centers vanished in sequential explosions that painted the starfield with brief moments of orange and white light. Dr. Chun activated their pod's emergency transmitter, broadcasting their situation toward Earth on all frequencies. The message would take weeks to arrive, but it would carry news of what had happened here. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he hoped that his government would respond appropriately. The final attack came from the Empire's planet killer weapons. The massive energy beams swept through the debris field, vaporizing even the smallest fragments until nothing remained of Colony Station 7 except scattered atoms. The message was clear: human expansion would not be tolerated. But something had gone wrong with the Empire's calculations. Escape Pod 7 Alpha, carrying the Chun family, had suffered a navigation malfunction during launch. Instead of following the predetermined evacuation route, it had been thrown off course by a collision with station debris. The pod tumbled through space, its occupants unconscious from the impact, while the Empire's sensors failed to detect its erratic trajectory. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself alone. Her parents lay motionless in their acceleration couches, killed by the violent decompression when a hull fragment had punctured their pod's main compartment. The 8-year-old girl was trapped in the pod's emergency shelter, a tiny sealed section designed to keep one person alive for 72 hours. She pressed the distress beacon with trembling fingers, not understanding that help was weeks away. Outside the shelter's single porthole, the stars wheeled slowly as the damaged pod continued its tumbling journey through the void. Ambassador Korthak reviewed the operation's success with satisfaction. The human colony had been eliminated with minimal expenditure of resources, and the survivors would serve as additional examples of Imperial power. The other human settlements would receive recordings of the attack within days, along with formal warnings about future expansion. "Mission accomplished," he reported to the Imperial Council. "The human colony has been destroyed. Estimated casualties, 2,000. This should serve as an adequate deterrent to further expansion." But Korthak had made a critical error. In his species' culture, the death of children was considered a regrettable but acceptable consequence of warfare. The hegemony had practiced this form of calculated brutality for millennia, and it had always proven effective in controlling younger species. They had never encountered humans before. 72 hours after the attack, Sarah's distress beacon finally attracted attention. A deep space survey vessel, the UNSV Prometheus, detected the weak signal while conducting routine stellar mapping operations. Captain Patricia Williams ordered an immediate course change, though she held little hope of finding survivors. The rescue team found Sarah unconscious, but alive in the pod's emergency shelter. The sight of the small child, surrounded by the bodies of her parents, struck the hardened spacers with unexpected force. They'd seen death before, but something about Sarah's innocence in the face of such senseless violence touched a nerve that none of them had expected. "Jesus Christ," whispered Chief Medical Officer Robert Kim as he carefully extracted Sarah from the pod. "She's just a baby." As the Prometheus's medical bay worked to save Sarah's life, Captain Williams studied the pod's sensor logs. The readings told a story of systematic destruction that left her cold with rage. This hadn't been a battle or even a territorial dispute. This had been extermination, pure and simple. Williams immediately transmitted Sarah's testimony and the pod sensor data toward Earth via quantum communication. The 8-year-old's confused, heartbroken account of watching her home die while alien ships destroyed everything she'd ever known would reach Earth's leadership in real time. And humanity would not react the way the Galactic Empire expected. On Earth, the news of Colony Station 7's destruction reached the United Earth Defense Council during their regular morning briefing. Admiral Janet Torres, the Council's military coordinator, listened to Sarah's transmitted testimony with growing fury. The child's broken description of watching her parents die while alien ships methodically destroyed their home struck every person in the room with the force of a physical blow. 2,000 people, Admiral Torres said quietly, including 300 children. President Chun Martinez, no relation to the murdered family, stood at the head of the conference table, her face pale with controlled rage. "Admiral, what's our current military readiness?" "We have the 3rd Fleet on maneuvers near Jupiter, and the 5th Fleet is completing war games near Alpha Centauri," Torres replied. "Both fleets are at full combat readiness. And our new ships..." Admiral Torres's expression hardened. The Retribution-class dreadnoughts completed their trials last month. All 12 ships are operational and ready for deployment. The Retribution-class vessels represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Each ship stretched 1,500 meters from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to level continents. They incorporated lessons learned from 50 years of interstellar conflict and represented humanity's commitment to defending its colonies. But, more importantly, they carried something the Empire had never encountered: the fury of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to fight back against overwhelming odds. "What are your recommendations, Admiral?" President Martinez asked. Torres studied the tactical displays showing human colonial positions. 17 settlements, each one now a potential target for Imperial aggression. The Empire had made their position clear. Humanity would remain confined to its home system or face extermination. "Madam President," Torres said carefully, "we have 2 options. We can abandon our colonies and retreat to Earth, hoping the Empire will leave us alone. Or we can respond with sufficient force to ensure this never happens again." President Martinez looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. She saw anger, grief, and determination reflected in their expressions. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Admiral, you have authorization to deploy all available fleets. Find these bastards and make them pay for what they've done." As the emergency session continued, none of Earth's leaders noticed the small figure watching from the medical bay of the UNSV Prometheus. Sarah Chun, now the sole survivor of Colony Station 7, stared out at the stars with eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. In her small hands, she clutched a piece of station debris that the rescue team had allowed her to keep, a twisted fragment of the playground where she'd spent countless hours playing with her friends. All of those friends are gone now, reduced to atoms by alien weapons. But Sarah was alive, and her testimony would soon reach Earth. Humanity was about to learn what had been done to their children, and the galaxy would learn why that had been a mistake. The United Earth Defense Fleet assembled at Jupiter Station like a gathering storm. 12 Retribution-class dreadnoughts formed the core of the armada, their hulls gleaming silver against the gas giant's swirling atmosphere. Supporting them were 64 heavy cruisers, 128 destroyers, and over 300 smaller vessels. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Janet Torres stood on the bridge of the flagship UEDS Vengeance, watching the final preparations for deployment. Each ship carried the best of human technology: adaptive plasma cannons, quantum torpedo systems, and armor plating forged from neutronium composites. But more than that, they carried something the Empire had failed to calculate in their equations: the righteous fury of a species defending its children. The Admiral reviewed Sarah Chen's testimony once more, her jaw tightening with each word the traumatized child had spoken. The Empire had destroyed Colony Station 7 not in battle, but as a demonstration. They'd murdered 2,000 innocent people, including 300 children, simply to send a message about humanity's place in their galactic order. "Admiral, all ships report ready for departure," announced Commander Sarah Walsh, the fleet's operations coordinator. Torres nodded grimly. "Signal the fleet. We depart for hegemony space in 30 minutes. Today, we teach the Empire that humanity does not yield to terror." Meanwhile, in the hegemony's core systems, Ambassador Korthak was receiving disturbing intelligence reports. Human ships have been detected massing near their homeworld, but the numbers exceeded all previous estimates of their military capabilities. The primitive species that should have been cowed by the demonstration at Colony Station 7 appear to be mobilizing for war. "This is unexpected," Subcommander Veltar observed as he studied the tactical displays. "Our intelligence suggested the humans possess perhaps 20 major warships. These readings indicate 10 times that number." Korthak's mandibles clicked with irritation. Humans have always been unpredictable. Perhaps they require a more comprehensive lesson in imperial authority. The Empire's response was swift and predictable. The Second Conquest Fleet, consisting of 47 major vessels, began moving toward human space under the command of Fleet Admiral Zektar. The Imperial strategy was simple: overwhelm the human homeworld before their primitive ships could pose a genuine threat. But the Empire had based their intelligence on human military doctrine from the asteroid wars, a conflict fought with primitive chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. They had no idea that humanity had spent the last 20 years preparing for exactly this scenario. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, where Imperial forces had established a forward observation post. The facility monitored human activities and served as an early warning station for the Empire's inner systems. Admiral Torres had chosen it as humanity's first target for symbolic reasons. It would serve notice that the Empire's surveillance of human space was no longer welcome. "Range to target 2 million kilometers," reported Weapons Officer Lieutenant Colonel Mike Chun, a distant cousin of Sarah's father who had volunteered specifically for this mission. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres," she announced over the fleet communication system. "The Empire destroyed Colony Station 7 because they believed we would cower in fear. They killed our children because they thought we would accept their dominion without question. Today, we prove them wrong." The Imperial Observation Post was a relatively small facility, a massive space station surrounded by automated sensor arrays and defensive platforms. Its commander, Station Leader Mortak, watched the approaching human fleet with growing alarm. The energy signatures his sensors were detecting exceeded all projections for human military capability. "Send an immediate message to Fleet Command," he ordered his communications officer. The humans have deployed military assets far beyond our previous estimates. The message would never be sent. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up the darkness like a small star being born. 12 dreadnoughts unleashed their full firepower simultaneously, sending streams of plasma and quantum torpedoes racing toward the Imperial station. The Empire's defensive systems, designed to handle conventional projectile weapons, proved utterly inadequate against humanity's advanced technology. The station's shields collapsed under the initial barrage, and the follow-up attacks tore through its hull like tissue paper. What had taken the Empire centuries to build was reduced to expanding gases in less than 5 minutes. But Admiral Torres wasn't finished. "Deploy the hunter-killer groups," she commanded. "I want every Imperial asset in this system eliminated." The smaller human ships spread out like a pack of wolves, hunting down the automated sensor platforms and mining facilities that serve the Empire's war machine. Each installation was systematically destroyed, its debris scattered to make clear that humanity's response would be thorough and merciless. News of the attack reached Imperial High Command within hours, creating consternation among the Empire's leadership. Species Coordinator Velmac studied the battle reports with growing unease. The humans had displayed technological capabilities that exceeded their intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. "How is this possible?" demanded Supreme Coordinator Zarthak. "Our projections indicated that the human species possessed limited industrial capabilities and primitive weapons technology." Velmac's 4 eyes studied the tactical analyses with scientific precision. "Our intelligence was flawed, Supreme Coordinator. It appears that humans have been concealing the true extent of their military development." The truth was more complex than the Empire realized. Humanity had indeed been hiding their capabilities, but not through any deliberate deception. Human industrial capacity had grown exponentially in the 20 years since first contact with alien technology. The discovery that faster-than-light travel was possible had triggered a technological revolution that transformed human civilization. Every major corporation on Earth had invested heavily in military research, driven by the knowledge that hostile aliens were inevitable. The result was a military-industrial complex that could produce warships at a rate the Empire had never encountered from a species so young. "What are your recommendations?" Supreme Coordinator Zarthak asked. "We must deploy the first conquest fleet immediately," Velmac replied. "This situation requires overwhelming force before the humans can consolidate their advantages." The first conquest fleet was the Empire's elite military unit, consisting of 150 major vessels, including 12 planet killers. It had conquered dozens of star systems and never suffered a significant defeat. Supreme Coordinator Zarthak nodded his approval. "Make it so, and ensure that the human homeworld understands the consequences of defying Imperial authority." Back on Earth, President Martinez received Admiral Torres's initial battle report with grim satisfaction. The Proxima Centauri operation had been a complete success, with 0 human casualties and total destruction of Imperial assets. But she knew this was only the beginning. "Admiral," she said during their quantum communication link, "what's your assessment of Imperial response capabilities?" Torres consulted her tactical displays, studying intelligence gathered from captured Imperial equipment. "Madam President, based on their technology and organizational structure, I estimate they could deploy between 1 and 200 major vessels. Our current fleet can handle those numbers, but we should expect them to escalate." "What do you need?" "The 7th and 9th fleets should be deployed immediately to protect our colonial assets," Torres replied. "And I recommend activating the Omega Protocol." President Martinez paused. The Omega Protocol represented humanity's most closely guarded secret, a network of automated defense systems hidden throughout human space. Each system contained enough firepower to destroy entire fleets, activated only in the event of an existential threat to human civilization. "Authorization granted," she said quietly. "Admiral, You have full discretionary authority to prosecute this war as you see fit. As the communication link closed, President Martinez turned to her science advisor, Dr. Elizabeth Kim. Doctor, how many ships can our shipyards produce if we go to maximum wartime production? Dr. Kim consulted her data pad. If we convert all civilian production facilities and activate the emergency shipyard protocols, we can produce approximately 50 major vessels per month. However, that would require total economic mobilization. Do it, Martinez ordered. Whatever this war costs us, losing is not an option. The human war machine began to transform with frightening efficiency. Civilian factories retooled to produce warship components, while asteroid mining operations expanded to provide the raw materials for an endless stream of vessels. Earth's orbital shipyards worked around the clock, launching new ships as fast as they could be completed. But humanity's greatest advantage wasn't technological, it was psychological. The Empire had made the mistake of murdering human children in front of other human children. Sarah Chin's testimony had been broadcast across every human world, creating a level of unified determination that the Empire couldn't comprehend. In the hegemony capital system, Fleet Admiral Zektar received his deployment orders with professional satisfaction. The First Conquest Fleet had never failed to subjugate a rebellious species, and humans would prove no exception despite their unexpected technological capabilities. Begin the advance toward the human home system, he commanded. We will demonstrate why the Empire has maintained galactic order for 3 millennia. The First Conquest Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark tide of destruction. 150 ships of the line, each one a monument to imperial power, formed attack formations as they approached the Sol system's outer planets. Their planet-killer weapons charged as they prepared to reduce Earth to cosmic dust. But they found the system empty. "Where are their ships?" demanded Sub-Admiral Korvac as his sensors swept the seemingly deserted planets. Fleet Admiral Zektar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Intelligence had indicated that the human fleet was concentrated near their homeworld, but the system appeared to contain only civilian traffic and commercial vessels. "Perhaps they fled when they learned of our approach," suggested Navigation Commander Thyrak. The answer came in the form of weapons fire from concealed positions throughout the asteroid belt. The Omega Protocol defense systems revealed themselves in a thunderous barrage of plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. The automated fortresses had been hidden among the asteroids for 20 years, waiting for exactly this moment. "Ambush!" Zektar shouted as his flagship rocked under the impact of multiple torpedo strikes. All ships, evasive maneuvers. But the Imperial fleet was caught in a carefully prepared killing ground. Every approach route to Earth had been seeded with hidden weapons platforms, each one designed to engage capital ships at maximum range. The Empire's vessels found themselves under attack from dozens of directions simultaneously. The first Imperial ship to die was the heavy cruiser Domination's Pride. Concentrated fire from 6 hidden platforms overwhelmed its shields and reduced its hull to molten slag in seconds. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a brief new sun, and Fleet Admiral Zektar realized that the Empire had walked into a trap. "Signal the retreat," he ordered, but it was too late. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace behind the Imperial formation, cutting off their line of retreat. Admiral Torres had anticipated the Empire's strategy perfectly, using the Sol system's defenses to channel their fleet into a position where it could be destroyed at humanity's leisure. "All ships, attack formation Delta," Torres commanded. "Let's finish what the Empire started." The Battle of Sol lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the First Conquest Fleet. 150 Imperial vessels were reduced to scrap metal and expanding gas clouds, while the human fleet suffered only minor damage. It was the most decisive naval victory in human history, and it served notice that the Empire had severely underestimated their opponents. As the battle concluded, Admiral Torres received a priority communication from Earth. President Martinez appeared on her screen, with news that chilled the Admiral's blood despite their victory. "Admiral, we've received intelligence from our deep space reconnaissance units. The Empire is mobilizing their grand fleet, over 800 major vessels, including 40 planet killers. They're planning to exterminate all human life in the galaxy." Torres studied the intelligence data with professional detachment. 800 ships represented a significant challenge, but not an insurmountable one. Humanity had been preparing for this possibility since first contact with alien species. "Madam President," she said calmly, "I recommend we accelerate the timeline for Operation Prometheus." President Martinez nodded grimly. Operation Prometheus was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, a strategy so audacious that it had been classified beyond top secret. If the Empire wanted to escalate to total war, humanity would show them what that actually meant. "Authorization granted," Martinez replied. "Admiral, you are hereby granted unlimited authority to prosecute this war. Use whatever methods are necessary to protect human civilization." As the communication link closed, Admiral Torres turned to her staff officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Empire has decided that this conflict will be a war of extermination. We're going to honor their choice." She activated the fleet's strategic communication system, reaching every human military unit across known space. "This is Admiral Torres to all human forces. The Empire has declared their intention to eliminate our species entirely. Operation Prometheus is now active. Repeat, Operation Prometheus is active." Throughout human space, hidden bases and secret installations came to life. Massive shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations revealed their true purpose. Weapons laboratories that had been masquerading as research stations began producing armaments designed specifically to destroy Imperial technology. And in the deepest vaults beneath Earth's surface, scientists activated projects that had been theoretical until this moment. Technologies so dangerous that they had been considered unthinkable for anything less than a war of species survival. The Empire wanted to demonstrate the price of defying galactic order. Humanity was about to demonstrate why apex predators should never be cornered. In the hegemony capital, Supreme Coordinator Zarthak received the news of the first Conquest fleet's destruction with shock that quickly transformed into rage. No species had ever successfully resisted Imperial authority on this scale. The humans had not merely won a battle. They had humiliated the Empire before the entire galaxy. "Mobilize the Grand Fleet," he ordered. "I want every human world reduced to ash. I want their homeworld cracked like an egg. This species will serve as an example to any other primitives who might consider defying Imperial will." The Grand Fleet was the Empire's ultimate weapon, reserved for threats to Imperial existence itself. It had been deployed only 3 times in the Empire's 3,000-year history, each time resulting in the complete extermination of the target species. But as the massive fleet began assembling in Imperial space, intelligence reports continued to arrive from human territory. The humans weren't retreating or preparing defensive positions. Instead, they appeared to be expanding their military production at an impossible rate. "This is concerning," Species Coordinator Velmac reported to the Supreme Coordinator. "Our projections indicate that human industrial capacity exceeds our previous estimates by several orders of magnitude." Zarthak's mandibles clicked with irritation. Impossible. No species this young could possess such capabilities. But the evidence was undeniable. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy at an accelerating rate, each one more advanced than Imperial intelligence had predicted. Worse, they were operating with a level of coordination that suggested a military doctrine far more sophisticated than any previously encountered. "Perhaps," Velmax suggested carefully, "we should consider negotiating with the humans. Their capabilities suggest that conquest may prove expensive." The Supreme Coordinator's 4 eyes fixed on his subordinate with cold fury. "The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. If the humans possess unexpected capabilities, then we will simply deploy greater force. The Grand Fleet will demonstrate the futility of opposing Imperial authority. But even as the Grand Fleet prepared for deployment, disturbing reports continued to arrive from across the Empire. Human ships had been detected in multiple systems, conducting what appeared to be reconnaissance operations. Several Imperial installations had gone silent without explanation. The Empire was beginning to realize that they weren't fighting a defensive war against a cornered species. The humans had gone on the offensive with a speed and coordination that suggested they had been preparing for this conflict far longer than anyone had realized. And in a small medical facility aboard the UEDS Vengeance, 8-year-old Sarah Chun was recovering from her ordeal with the help of the fleet's best doctors and counselors. She spent her days drawing pictures of her parents and her lost home, while the massive warship around her prepared for battles that would determine the fate of 2 species. Sarah didn't understand the strategic implications of what was happening around her. She only knew that her parents were gone and that the aliens who had killed them were still out there, threatening other children. But she also knew that the humans around her were preparing to make sure it never happened again. "Are we going to stop the bad aliens?" she asked Dr. Kim during one of her therapy sessions. The ship's psychiatrist smiled sadly. "Yes, sweetheart. The brave men and women on these ships are going to make sure the bad aliens can never hurt anyone else." Sarah nodded seriously, clutching her piece of station debris. "Good. Nobody should lose their mommy and daddy like that." Dr. Kim felt tears threatening as she looked at the small girl who had become the symbol of humanity's righteous anger. Sarah's testimony had been broadcast across every human world, creating a level of unified determination that would have been impossible to achieve through any other means. The Empire had intended to demonstrate their power by murdering innocents. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity that they were completely unprepared to face. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had spent their entire evolutionary history at the top of their planet's food chain. Operation Prometheus began with surgical strikes across 17 Imperial systems simultaneously. Human strike forces, each consisting of fast attack ships and specialized infiltration vessels, emerged from hyperspace at carefully chosen targets throughout the Empire's infrastructure network. Admiral Torres had studied the Empire's organizational structure and identified its critical vulnerabilities: supply depots, communication hubs, and shipyard facilities that kept their war machine operational. The attacks came without warning and with devastating precision. At the Imperial Supply Depot in the Kepler 442 system, Strike Force Alpha materialized from hyperspace like ghosts seeking vengeance. Commander Lisa Rodriguez, named after the traffic control officer who had first detected the Empire's approach to Colony Station 7, led 18 destroyers and 36 fighters against the heavily fortified installation. "Remember Colony Station 7, she announced over the Strike Force communication system. No mercy for the Empire. The Imperial Depot was a massive facility designed to supply the Grand Fleet with everything from replacement parts to planet-killer munitions. Its destruction would cripple Imperial logistics for months, but, more importantly, it would send a message that nowhere in Imperial space was safe from human retribution. The attack began with electromagnetic pulse torpedoes that disabled the depot's defensive systems. Human fighters swarmed through the facility's superstructure, their pilots trained to exploit the weaknesses in Imperial shield technology. Within 30 minutes, the depot was an expanding cloud of debris and escaping atmosphere. But Commander Rodriguez wasn't finished. Her ships hunted down every Imperial vessel in the system, from massive cargo haulers to small patrol craft. Each ship was destroyed methodically, its crew given just enough time to send distress signals before their vessels were reduced to scrap metal. Similar scenes played out across the Empire as human strike forces demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every Imperial projection. The species that should have been cowering in fear after the destruction of Colony Station 7 had instead become a pack of apex predators stalking through Imperial space with deadly intent. In the hegemony capital, Supreme Coordinator Zarthak received reports of the attacks with growing alarm. 17 separate systems had been hit simultaneously, suggesting a level of coordination that exceeded anything the Empire had previously encountered from younger species. How many ships did they deploy for these attacks? He demanded. Species Coordinator Velmac studied the tactical reports with four-eyed precision. Conservative estimates suggest at least 300 human vessels, Supreme Coordinator. However, our intelligence indicates this represents only a fraction of their total fleet strength. The implications were staggering. If the humans could deploy 300 ships for simultaneous attacks while maintaining their primary fleet, their total military capacity exceeded Imperial estimates by an order of magnitude. The species that had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago possessed a war machine that rivaled the Empire itself. This is impossible, Zarthak declared. No species could achieve such industrial capacity in such a brief time span. But the evidence was undeniable. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy with increasing frequency, each one more advanced than Imperial intelligence had projected. The Empire's thousand-year technological advantage seemed to be evaporating with each engagement. The truth was more complex than Imperial leadership realized. Humanity hadn't achieved their technological revolution through natural development. They had compressed millions of years of evolution into 50 years through sheer determination and industrial focus. The discovery that alien life existed had triggered a species-wide commitment to survival that transformed human civilization. Every university on Earth had contributed to the war effort. Every corporation had invested in military research. Every government had coordinated their efforts toward a single goal, ensuring that humanity could defend itself against any extraterrestrial threat. The result was a military-industrial complex that could adapt and innovate at a speed the Empire had never encountered. Admiral Torres received the strike reports from her command center aboard the UEDS Vengeance with grim satisfaction. Operation Prometheus was proceeding ahead of schedule, with minimal human casualties and maximum disruption to Imperial capabilities. But she knew these initial strikes were merely the opening moves in a campaign that would determine the survival of both species. Admiral, reported Intelligence Officer Colonel Sarah Park, were detecting massive Imperial fleet movements in their core systems. They appear to be accelerating the Grand Fleet's deployment schedule. Torres studied the strategic displays showing Imperial ship positions across the galaxy. The Empire was mobilizing their ultimate military asset in response to human attacks, exactly as she had predicted. The Grand Fleet represented the Empire's greatest strength, but it also represented their greatest vulnerability. Signal all strike forces to implement Phase 2, she commanded. It's time to demonstrate why concentrated fleets are obsolete in modern warfare. Phase 2 of Operation Prometheus involved something the Empire had never encountered: distributed warfare conducted by autonomous human ships operating independently throughout Imperial space. Each vessel carried enough firepower to threaten capital ships, and each captain had discretionary authority to engage targets of opportunity. The Empire's traditional response to rebellion involved concentrating overwhelming force at key strategic points. But humanity's approach made such tactics irrelevant. There were no key strategic points to defend when every human ship was effectively a strategic weapon. Captain Jennifer Chun, a distant relative of the murdered family from Colony Station 7, commanded the destroyer UEDS Sarah's Vengeance on a hunting mission deep in Imperial space. Her ship carried experimental weapons designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Imperial shield technology, and her crew consisted of volunteers who had requested assignment to the most dangerous missions. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported her sensor officer. Imperial heavy cruiser, Domination class. Captain Shin smiled coldly. Domination-class cruisers had been used in the attack on Colony Station 7. Her ship's computer contained detailed analysis of their weaknesses, provided by Sarah Chin's escape pod sensor logs. All hands, battle stations, she announced. Today we hunt in memory of the fallen. The engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. Human weapons technology had advanced far beyond Imperial defensive capabilities, and The Sarah's Vengeance carried torpedoes designed to penetrate Imperial armor like tissue paper. The enemy cruiser managed to send a distress signal before its reactor core breached, adding one more voice to the growing chorus of Imperial panic. Throughout the Empire, similar scenes played out as human hunters stalked their prey with methodical precision. Imperial ships that had terrorized younger species for millennia found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by vessels from a species they had dismissed as primitive. But Admiral Torres knew that individual victories, however satisfying, wouldn't end this war. The Empire still possessed numerical superiority, and their grand fleet remained a threat to human civilization. She needed to force them into a decisive engagement where human advantages could be brought to bear. Admiral, reported Communication Officer Major David Kim, we're receiving a transmission from Imperial High Command. They're requesting a communication channel. Torres considered the request. The Empire had never negotiated with the species they conquered, preferring to rule through fear and overwhelming force. Their desire to communicate suggested that human attacks were having a greater impact than Imperial leadership wanted to admit. "Put them through," she ordered. The main screen flickered, revealing the alien visage of Supreme Coordinator Zarthak. His 4 eyes studied Torres with undisguised hostility, but she detected something else in his expression: uncertainty. "Admiral Torres of the human fleet," he began, his voice rendered in emotionless English by the universal translator. "Your species has demonstrated unexpected capabilities. The Empire is prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict." Torres smiled without warmth. "Supreme Coordinator, my species isn't interested in terms. We're interested in justice." "Justice?" Zarthak's mandibles clicked with confusion. "The Empire maintains galactic order. Your species violated that order by expanding beyond your designated zone." "You murdered children," Torres replied simply. 2,000 innocent people, including 300 children, were killed because you wanted to send a message. There can be no negotiation until that crime is answered. The Supreme Coordinator's expression hardened. "The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. If your species refuses reasonable terms, then the Grand Fleet will demonstrate the consequences of defying Imperial authority." "Bring your Grand Fleet," Torres said calmly. "We'll be waiting." The transmission ended, leaving Torres alone with her thoughts. The Empire still believed they were dealing with a traditional military conflict, where superior numbers and firepower would determine the outcome. They had no idea that humanity was fighting an entirely different kind of war. In the medical bay of the UEDS Vengeance, Sarah Chun was drawing another picture of her parents when the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated slightly, a sign that the massive vessel was changing course toward an engagement zone. The 8-year-old had learned to recognize these subtle signs during her weeks aboard the flagship. "Are we going to fight the bad aliens again?" she asked Dr. Kim during their daily session. "The brave soldiers on this ship are going to make sure the bad aliens can never hurt anyone again," Dr. Kim replied carefully. Sarah nodded seriously, adding details to her drawing. "I hope they hurt them back for what they did to Mommy and Daddy." Dr. Kim felt her throat tighten. Sarah's innocent desire for justice reflected the fury of an entire species, channeled through military precision and technological superiority that the Empire had never encountered. The child had no idea that her survival and testimony had triggered humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to apex predators. The Empire had intended to demonstrate their power by murdering innocents. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity that would remake the galactic balance of power. As the UEDS Vengeance approached the staging area for humanity's ultimate gambit, Admiral Torres reviewed the strategic situation with her senior staff. The Empire's Grand Fleet was assembling in their core systems, preparing for what they believed would be a decisive battle to crush human resistance. Intelligence estimates 800 major vessels, including 40 planet killers, reported Colonel Park. They're concentrating everything in the Hegemony Prime system for a coordinated assault on human space. Torres nodded grimly. The Empire's strategy was predictable: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision to eliminate the human threat permanently. It was exactly the same approach they had used to conquer dozens of species over the past millennium. "What they don't realize," she said quietly, "is that concentration makes them vulnerable to weapons they've never encountered." Phase 3 of Operation Prometheus would introduce the Empire to humanity's most closely guarded secret: weapons technology based on theoretical physics that had been considered too dangerous for practical application. The murder of children had convinced human leadership that no weapon was too dangerous when species survival was at stake. "Admiral," asked Chief Science Officer Dr. Elizabeth Warren, "are you certain about deploying the Nova-class torpedoes? The theoretical models suggest they could cause chain reactions that might affect multiple star systems." Torres studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet concentrations. The Empire had positioned their entire military force in a single system, believing that concentrated firepower would intimidate any opposition. They had no idea that human scientists had developed weapons capable of turning their strategy against them. "Doctor," the Empire chose to escalate this conflict to species extermination. "If they want to demonstrate the consequences of total war, then we'll honor their choice with our most advanced capabilities." The Nova-class torpedoes represented the pinnacle of human weapons technology, devices that could destabilize the quantum structure of matter itself, creating chain reactions that would spread through any concentration of mass. Each torpedo could theoretically destroy an entire fleet, but the weapons were so dangerous that they had never been tested at full yield. Until now. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace translation to Hegemony Prime," Torres commanded. "Today, we teach the Empire why humans don't forgive the murder of children." The human fleet began its final approach toward the heart of Imperial space, carrying weapons that would either end the war in humanity's favor or trigger consequences that no one could predict. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was about to demonstrate technologies that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. In the Hegemony capital system, the Grand Fleet waited in perfect formation, 800 ships arranged in defensive patterns that had proven effective against countless rebellious species. Fleet Admiral Zektar, the Empire's most experienced military commander, studied the strategic situation with professional confidence. "The humans cannot possibly challenge a force of this magnitude," he declared to his staff officers. Their recent victories were achieved through surprise and technological advantages that will prove meaningless against concentrated Imperial power. But even as he spoke, sensors detected the approaching human fleet. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Imperial databases, readings that suggested weapons systems beyond current theoretical understanding. Fleet Admiral reported his sensor officer with growing alarm. "The human ships are carrying energy sources that exceed our measurement capabilities. Their weapons systems appear to be based on principles we don't recognize." Zektar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human fleet consisted of only 300 vessels, barely a third the size of the Grand Fleet. But the energy readings from their weapons systems suggested capabilities that defied Imperial understanding of technological development. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "All ships, prepare for battle." Today, we demonstrate why the Empire has maintained galactic order for 3 millennia. But as the human fleet approached optimal firing range, Admiral Torres activated systems that would introduce the Empire to warfare beyond their comprehension. The species that had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago was about to demonstrate why apex predators should never be underestimated. The final battle for galactic supremacy was about to begin, and the Empire had no idea what they were facing. The Battle of Hegemony Prime began at 0600 Universal Standard Time, when a human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Imperial capital system. Admiral Torres had chosen the timing deliberately, early enough to catch the Grand Fleet in their defensive formations, but late enough to ensure that Imperial leadership would witness the complete destruction of their ultimate military asset. "All ships, battle formation Omega," Torres commanded from the bridge of the UEDS Vengeance. "Today we finish what the Empire started when they murdered our children." The human fleet spread into an attack formation that the Empire had never encountered, a dispersed pattern that maximized their weapons' effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to Imperial counterfire. Each ship carried Nova-class torpedoes, weapons so advanced that they existed at the theoretical limits of human engineering. Fleet Admiral Zektar watched the approaching human forces with professional assessment. Despite their technological advantages, 300 vessels could not possibly challenge 800 ships of the line, supported by 40 planet killers. The mathematics of warfare were absolute, regardless of technological disparities. All ships prepare to demonstrate Imperial supremacy, he announced across the Grand Fleet's communication system. These humans will serve as an example to any species that considers defying our authority. The first exchange of fire lit up the space between the fleets like competing stars. Imperial plasma cannons and particle beams reached across millions of kilometers, while human vessels responded with weapons that bent the laws of physics to their will. The initial salvos revealed a technological gulf that shocked Imperial commanders. Human adaptive shields absorbed Imperial energy weapons with impossible efficiency, while human plasma cannons cut through Imperial defenses like superheated knives through butter. The technological advantage that had allowed the Empire to dominate the galaxy for millennia had been rendered obsolete in 50 years of human innovation. But Admiral Torres knew that superior technology alone wouldn't end this war. The Empire possessed enough ships to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers, even with their technological disadvantage. She needed to demonstrate capabilities that would convince Imperial leadership that continued resistance was futile. All ships prepare Nova-class torpedoes for deployment, she ordered. Target the Imperial Command Formation. The Nova-class torpedoes represented humanity's most desperate gamble. Weapons that could theoretically end the war in minutes, but at a cost that might affect the stability of local space. Each torpedo contained enough compressed quantum energy to destabilize the atomic structure of entire fleets. Dr. Elizabeth Warren monitored the weapons from her science station with growing anxiety. Admiral, theoretical models suggest that deploying multiple Nova-class torpedoes simultaneously could create cascade effects that might propagate beyond the target area. Torres studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet concentrations. The Empire had positioned their entire military force within a relatively small volume of space, believing that concentrated firepower would overwhelm any opposition. They had no idea that their formation made them vulnerable to weapons that operated beyond conventional physics. The Empire chose to escalate this conflict to species extermination. We're going to demonstrate why that was a mistake they'll never have the opportunity to repeat. The first Nova-class torpedo launched from the UEDS Retribution, accelerating toward the Imperial Command Formation at near light speed. Its passage through space created visual distortions as the weapon's quantum field interacted with local matter, bending light around its trajectory like a lens made of pure energy. Fleet Admiral Zektar watched the approaching projectile with professional interest. Human weapons had demonstrated impressive capabilities, but a single torpedo could not threaten a capital ship formation protected by overlapping shield arrays and point defense systems. Intercept that missile, he commanded his weapons officers. Demonstrate the futility of challenging Imperial defenses. Imperial point defense systems engaged the torpedo with concentrated fire from dozens of weapons platforms. Particle beams and plasma cannons reached out toward the human weapon, confident in their ability to destroy any conventional projectile. The beams passed harmlessly through the torpedo's quantum field. What? Zektar demanded as his weapons officers reported the impossible readings. How can their weapon be unaffected by our defensive systems? The answer came 30 seconds later when a Nova-class torpedo reached optimal detonation range. The weapon didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, it released compressed quantum energy that destabilized the atomic bonds of everything within a 50-kilometer radius. 12 Imperial capital ships simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in a process that violated everything the Empire understood about weapons technology. The explosion created a brief artificial star that outshone the system's primary sun, while gravitational waves propagated through local space like ripples in a cosmic pond. But the Nova-class torpedoes' effects weren't limited to the initial detonation. The quantum destabilization spread through the Imperial formation like a plague, affecting ships that had been outside the weapon's primary blast radius. Entire vessels found their hull plating dissolving at the molecular level as the weapon's effects propagated through the closely packed fleet. "Impossible," Zektar whispered as he watched 37 major vessels reduced to expanding energy clouds. "No weapon possesses such capabilities." Admiral Torres watched the torpedoes' effects with grim satisfaction. The Nova-class weapons represented humanity's commitment to species survival. Technologies so dangerous that they challenged the fundamental stability of local space, but effective enough to end interstellar conflicts permanently. "All ships, deploy remaining Nova-class torpedoes," she commanded. "Full spread, maximum dispersion." 18 more torpedoes launched simultaneously from different human vessels, their trajectories calculated to maximize the spread of quantum destabilization throughout the Imperial formation. Each weapon carried enough energy to destroy dozens of ships, while the cumulative effect would render the entire Grand Fleet combat ineffective. Supreme Coordinator Zarthak watched the battle from his command center on Hegemony Prime with growing horror. The Grand Fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that exceeded every Imperial projection for technological development. The species that should have been easily conquered was demonstrating capabilities that challenged the Empire's fundamental understanding of warfare. "Send a priority message to all Imperial territories," he commanded his communications staff. "Full military mobilization. Deploy all reserve fleets immediately." But even as the orders went out, Zarthak realized that conventional tactics would prove inadequate against human capabilities. The Empire faced an enemy that had compressed millions of years of technological development into 50 years of focused research, creating weapons systems that operated beyond Imperial comprehension. The second wave of Nova-class torpedoes reached their targets in a cascade of destruction that lit up the Hegemony Prime system like a supernova. Quantum destabilization effects spread through the Grand Fleet's formation, dissolving ships at the molecular level while their crews watched helplessly. Fleet Admiral Zektar found himself commanding a fleet that was literally disappearing around him. Vessels that had dominated the galaxy for centuries were reduced to expanding gas clouds in seconds, their crews vaporized by weapons that operated beyond the laws of conventional physics. "Signal general retreat," he commanded, though he suspected it was already too late. "All remaining ships, emergency hyperspace translation." But the Nova-class torpedoes had destabilized local space to the point where hyperspace travel became impossible. Imperial ships found themselves trapped in the Hegemony Prime system with an enemy that possessed weapons capable of destroying entire fleets with single shots. Admiral Torres monitored the battle's progress from her command station with professional satisfaction. The Grand Fleet was being methodically destroyed with minimal human casualties, exactly as Operation Prometheus had been designed. But she knew that victory in battle didn't guarantee victory in war. The Empire still possessed thousands of ships scattered across the galaxy. "Admiral," reported Communication Officer Major Kim, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Imperial vessels." Torres considered the communications with cold calculation. The Empire had chosen to escalate this conflict to species extermination when they murdered the children of Colony Station 7. Their surrender signals represented tactical expedience rather than genuine remorse for their actions. "Ignore the surrender signals," she ordered. "Continue the attack until all Imperial vessels are destroyed." The decision violated every human military tradition regarding the treatment of defeated enemies. But Torres understood that this war was being fought for the survival of human civilization. The Empire had demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide, allowing their military forces to survive would only postpone the next attempt at human extermination. In the medical bay of the UEDS Vengeance, 8-year-old Sarah Chun felt the ship's artificial gravity fluctuate as the massive vessel maneuvered during combat operations. She had learned to recognize these sensations during her weeks aboard the flagship, understanding instinctively that the brave men and women around her were fighting to prevent other children from losing their parents. "Are we winning?" she asked Dr. Kim during their daily session. "Yes, sweetheart, they are." Kim replied carefully. "The bad aliens can never hurt anyone else." Sarah nodded seriously, adding details to her latest drawing, a picture of the UEDS Vengeance surrounded by stars. She didn't understand the strategic implications of the battle raging around her, but she knew that her survival had triggered something important in the adults who cared for her. The child had no idea that her testimony had served as the catalyst for humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to apex predators. The Empire had intended to demonstrate their power by murdering innocents. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity that was reshaping the galactic balance of power. The final phase of the Battle of Hegemony Prime began when Admiral Torres deployed humanity's most closely guarded secret weapon, the Omega Torpedo. Unlike the Nova-class weapons, which destabilized matter at the quantum level, the Omega Torpedo affected the fundamental structure of space-time itself. "Admiral," warned Dr. Warren from her science station, "deploying an Omega weapon in this system could create permanent spatial distortions. We might render the entire region uninhabitable." Torres studied the tactical displays showing the remaining Imperial forces. Despite the devastating effectiveness of the Nova-class torpedoes, nearly 200 Imperial vessels remained operational. Traditional weapons would require hours to eliminate them all, providing opportunities for some ships to escape and report human capabilities to the Empire's reserve fleets. "The Empire chose to make this a war of extermination," she replied quietly. "We're going to demonstrate why that was the last mistake they'll ever make." The Omega Torpedo launched from the UEDS Vengeance, with visible distortions in space-time trailing behind it like the wake of a ship sailing through reality itself. The weapon's passage toward the Imperial formation created gravitational anomalies that bent starlight around its trajectory. Supreme Coordinator Zarthak watched the approaching weapon from his command center with a growing realization that the Empire faced extinction. Human technological capabilities exceeded every projection his scientists had produced, suggesting a level of innovation that challenged the fundamental assumptions about species development. "All forces, maximum power to shields," he broadcast to the remaining Imperial ships. "Prepare for impact." The Omega Torpedo detonated in the geometric center of the Imperial formation, creating a localized space-time distortion that affected everything within a 100-kilometer radius. Ships caught in the weapon's effect found themselves experiencing temporal acceleration that aged their hulls centuries and seconds, while gravitational fluctuations tore vessels apart at the subatomic level. But the weapon's most devastating effect was psychological. The Empire's remaining forces watched their comrades die in ways that violated every law of physics, killed by weapons that seemed to operate beyond the boundaries of rational science. When the Omega Torpedo's effects finally dissipated, nothing remained of the Grand Fleet except expanding energy clouds and spatial distortions that would persist for millions of years. 800 Imperial vessels, representing the pinnacle of their military might, had been reduced to cosmic debris in less than 6 hours. Fleet Admiral Zektar was among the last to die, his flagship caught in a temporal distortion that accelerated time until his vessel aged to dust in subjective seconds. His final transmission to Imperial High Command was a warning that the Empire had underestimated human capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Admiral Torres surveyed the battlefield with grim satisfaction. Operation Prometheus had succeeded beyond even her most optimistic projections, eliminating the Empire's primary military force with minimal human casualties. But she knew that victory in battle didn't guarantee victory in war. "All ships, prepare for Phase 4, she commanded. We're going to visit every Imperial world and explain why murdering human children was a mistake. Phase 4 of Operation Prometheus involved something the Empire had never experienced: systematic destruction of their infrastructure by an enemy that possessed technological superiority. Human fleets would visit every Imperial system, eliminating military installations and industrial facilities while leaving civilian populations intact but humbled. The message would be clear: the Empire's reign of terror was over, and humanity would ensure it never resumed. In the ruins of the Hegemony Prime system, spatial distortions created by human weapons would serve as a permanent memorial to the consequences of underestimating humanity's commitment to protecting its children. The Empire had intended to demonstrate their power through the murder of innocents. Instead, they had awakened the apex predator of the galaxy 6 months after the destruction of the Grand Fleet at Hegemony Prime. Admiral Janet Torres stood on the observation deck of the UEDS Vengeance, watching human construction teams rebuild the shattered Imperial capital. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same species the Empire had dismissed as primitive was now using superior technology to repair the damage their weapons had inflicted. The Phase 4 campaign had concluded with total human victory across 800 Imperial systems. Every military installation had been systematically destroyed, every weapons facility reduced to scrap metal, and every Imperial warship either captured or vaporized. The Empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 millennia had been dismantled in 6 months by a species they had underestimated. "Admiral," reported Commander Sarah Walsh, approaching with the day's intelligence briefings, "the final Imperial holdouts have surrendered. The Outer Rim territories have accepted human authority without resistance." Torres nodded grimly. The Empire's collapse had been inevitable once human fleets demonstrated their technological superiority, but the speed of their capitulation suggested a species broken by the comprehensive nature of their defeat. The same aliens who had murdered children to demonstrate their power now cowered before the consequences of their actions. "What's the status of civilian populations in the conquered territories?" Torres asked. "Surprisingly stable," Walsh replied. "Most Imperial citizens seem relieved that the war is over." Apparently, the Empire's military was never popular among civilian populations. The truth was more complex than Imperial propaganda had suggested. The Hegemony's 3,000-year reign had been maintained through fear and systematic oppression, creating populations that viewed their conquerors more as liberators than invaders. Humans had been careful to target only military and industrial assets, leaving civilian infrastructure intact. But Admiral Torres knew that military victory was only the first step in establishing lasting peace. The galaxy needed a new order, one that prevented future conflicts while ensuring that no species would ever again consider genocide an acceptable diplomatic tool. In the medical bay of the UEDS Vengeance, 9-year-old Sarah Chun was celebrating her birthday with a small party organized by the ship's crew. The brave men and women who had avenged her parents' death had become her extended family, and she had grown comfortable aboard the massive warship that had served as her home for nearly a year. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," said Dr. Kim as Sarah blew out the candles on her cake. "What did you wish for?" Sarah considered the question with the serious expression she'd developed since her ordeal. "I wish that no other kids would ever lose their mommies and daddies like I did." The adults around her felt their throats tighten with emotion. Sarah's innocent desire for justice had served as the catalyst for humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to the dominant military force in the galaxy. The child had no idea that her testimony had triggered changes that would affect trillions of beings across thousands of star systems. But her wish was about to be granted in ways she couldn't imagine. President Chin Martinez stood before the United Earth Assembly, preparing to announce humanity's plans for governing their vast, new territories. The destruction of the Galactic Empire had created a power vacuum that affected 7,000 star systems, and Earth's leadership faced the challenge of establishing stable governance across an area larger than human imagination could easily comprehend. "Fellow citizens," she began, her voice carried across human space by quantum communication arrays. 6 months ago, the Galactic Empire made the mistake of murdering our children. Today, that empire no longer exists. But victory in war brings responsibilities that we must fulfill with the same determination that won us this conflict. The assembly chamber, filled with representatives from 17 human colonies, listened with rapt attention as Martinez outlined humanity's vision for galactic governance. The new order would be built on principles that the Empire had never understood: cooperation instead of domination, protection of the innocent instead of systematic oppression. The Galactic Empire ruled through fear, Martinez continued. They maintained order by threatening genocide against any species that challenged their authority. Humanity will rule through justice, ensuring that every species in our territory can develop according to their own nature without fear of extermination. But establishing justice across 7,000 star systems would require capabilities that even humanity's advanced technology couldn't provide through military force alone. The new galactic government would need to earn legitimacy through demonstrating that human rule offered advantages that the Empire's oppression had never provided. The solution came from an unexpected source: the Empire's former subjects. Ambassador Th Lack of the Centauran Federation was the first alien representative to request formal audience with human leadership. His species had endured 3 centuries of imperial oppression, forced to provide resources and labor for the Empire's war machine, while receiving nothing in return except threats of annihilation. Admiral Torres, he said during their first meeting aboard the UEDS Vengeance, "My people wish to formally request inclusion in humanity's new galactic order. We offer our expertise in stellar engineering and quantum physics in exchange for protection and representation in your government." Torres studied the alien ambassador with professional assessment. The Centaurans possessed technological capabilities that complemented human strengths, and their voluntary allegiance would provide legitimacy for humanity's expanding influence. But she also understood that accepting alien allies required careful consideration of long-term implications. Ambassador Th Lack, humanity has no interest in recreating the Empire's oppressive system under different management. If your people join our federation, they will be partners rather than subjects. The concept was revolutionary by galactic standards. The Empire had never offered partnership to conquered species, preferring to maintain control through systematic humiliation and the constant threat of violence. Humanity's willingness to share power represented a fundamental departure from 3,000 years of imperial precedent. Within weeks, dozens of former imperial subjects requested inclusion in the emerging human federation. Species that had been oppressed for millennia saw humanity's victory as an opportunity to participate in galactic governance rather than simply endure it. The new Galactic Federation was formally established 1 year after the destruction of Colony Station 7, with Earth serving as the capital and Admiral Torres accepting appointment as the first Supreme Commander of Federation forces. The government combined human military superiority with alien expertise in areas where humanity's rapid development had left gaps in their knowledge base. But the Federation's most important innovation was the Children's Protection Accord, a document inspired by Sarah Chen's testimony that made the targeting of civilian populations, especially children, a crime punishable by species extinction. The Accord established absolute protection for non-combatants across all Federation territory, backed by humanity's demonstrated willingness to deploy weapons that operated beyond conventional physics. The former imperial territories welcomed the new order with enthusiasm that surprised human leadership. Citizens who had lived under the constant threat of annihilation for their entire lives embraced a government that offered protection instead of oppression. Production in former imperial systems increased dramatically as workers no longer labored under the threat of execution for minor infractions. But not every species accepted humanity's dominance peacefully. The Vorthan Empire, a civilization that had maintained independence from the Galactic Empire through superior military technology, viewed humanity's rapid expansion with alarm. Their leadership calculated that human dominance represented a long-term threat to Vorthan independence, and they began preparing for a preemptive strike designed to eliminate human capabilities before they could be brought to bear. Intelligence reports of Vorthan military preparations reached Admiral Torres 6 months after the Federation's establishment. The aliens possessed technology that rivaled human capabilities in several key areas, and their fleet consisted of over 200 vessels equipped with weapon systems that operated on principles human scientists didn't fully understand. Admiral, reported Intelligence Officer Colonel Park during their briefing. Vorthan force concentrations suggest they're preparing for a major offensive. Their target appears to be the Sol system itself. Torres studied the tactical assessments with professional interest. The Vorthans represented the first potential challenge to human supremacy since the Empire's defeat, and their apparent targeting of Earth suggested they understood the symbolic importance of striking at humanity's homeworld. "What's our assessment of Vorthan capabilities?" she asked. "Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to our pre-war systems," Park replied. "However, they possess significantly more ships than we initially encountered from the Empire, and their weapons technology seems to be based on different physical principles than Imperial systems." The Vorthan challenge came at a critical moment in the Federation's development. Human leadership had invested heavily in establishing civilian governance across their territory, reducing military production in favor of infrastructure development. The decision had been strategically sound for maintaining long-term stability, but it left humanity temporarily vulnerable to a determined attack. "Recommendations?" Torres asked her staff. Chief Science Officer Dr. Warren consulted her data displays before responding. "Admiral, I recommend immediate deployment of our most advanced weapon systems. The Vorthans don't appear to possess defensive technology capable of handling Nova-class or Omega-class weapons." Torres considered the recommendation carefully. The deployment of humanity's ultimate weapons against the Vorthans would send a clear message to any other species considering challenges to Federation authority. But it would also demonstrate capabilities that some alien partners might find intimidating. "Prepare the 7th Fleet for immediate deployment," she decided. "We're going to teach the Vorthans why the Empire's fate should serve as a lesson rather than a challenge." The Battle of Vorthan Prime lasted less than 4 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Vorthan Empire's military capabilities. Human forces deployed Nova-class torpedoes with devastating effectiveness, eliminating Vorthan fleets before they could bring their advanced weapons to bear. But unlike their campaign against the